10 years ago, my own son paid me $150 to disappear from his life. And the saddest part? I accepted it. Not because I needed the money, not because I was afraid of him, but because sometimes the greatest act of love a parent can give their child is respecting a decision that breaks their own heart. My name is William Carter. I'm 72 years old now, but 10 years ago I was simply a father who believed he had done his best. My wife passed away when our son, Daniel, was only 13 years old. From that day forward, I became both his father and his mother. I woke up at 4 every morning to work 2 jobs. I packed his school lunches before leaving for work and stayed awake late at night, helping him prepare for his exams. There were years when I wore the same 2 suits to work because I'd rather spend my money on his education than on myself. I never regretted a single sacrifice. Watching your child succeed is supposed to be every parent's greatest reward. And for a long time I believed I had succeeded as a father. Daniel graduated from one of the country's best business schools and eventually became the vice president of a luxury real estate company before turning 35. He was intelligent, hard-working, and ambitious, everything I had hoped he would become. Then he married Sophia. Sophia came from one of the wealthiest families in our city. Her parents owned several hotels and were well known among the city's elite social circles. To be honest, I had no problem with that. Money has never impressed me. Character does. Unfortunately, not everyone shares that belief. The first time I met Sophia's parents, her mother smiled politely before asking me what kind of car I drove. When I told her it was an old Toyota Camry, she looked genuinely surprised. "Oh," she said while sipping her wine, "how practical." That was the first time I realized I didn't quite belong in their world. Over the next few years, I noticed something slowly changing in my son. He stopped inviting me to business events, then family dinners. Eventually, he stopped introducing me as his father whenever wealthy clients were nearby. Instead, he would simply say, "This is William." At first, I convinced myself I was overthinking things. After all, parents are experts at making excuses for the people they love. Then came the family dinner that changed everything. Sophia's parents had invited nearly 20 relatives and close friends to celebrate Daniel's promotion at work. He personally called and asked me to come. "Dad," he said over the phone, "it would mean a lot to me." So I went. I even bought him an expensive fountain pen I couldn't really afford, because it reminded me of the one his grandfather gave me when I received my first promotion decades ago. I arrived 30 minutes early carrying the gift box and wearing my favorite navy blue blazer. The moment I walked through the front door, I knew I had made a mistake. Every guest was dressed in designer clothing. Luxury watches sparkled under the dining room lights, and expensive cars lined the driveway. I immediately noticed Daniel's expression when he saw me. He wasn't happy. He looked embarrassed. And before the night was over, my own son would publicly tell me something that would change both of our lives forever. Dinner began exactly as I expected. Sophia's father stood in the center of the dining room, proudly talking about luxury real estate investments and private country clubs. Everyone laughed at his jokes and praised Daniel's recent promotion. I quietly sat near the end of the table, smiling as I watched my son receive the recognition he had worked so hard to earn. Truthfully, I didn't care whether anyone acknowledged my presence. Seeing him happy was enough for me. At least that's what I believed when I walked through the front door. Halfway through dinner, Sophia's mother raised her wine glass. "Daniel has done remarkably well for himself," she said proudly. "He deserves all the success that has come into his life." Everyone applauded. Then one of their relatives asked a simple question. "So Daniel, who inspired you the most growing up?" I immediately smiled. Every parent secretly hopes to hear their child say something kind in moments like these. Daniel laughed softly before answering, "Honestly, my greatest inspiration was learning exactly what kind of life I didn't want." The entire table laughed politely, assuming he was joking. Unfortunately, he wasn't. "I grew up watching people settle for mediocrity," he continued. "I promised myself I would never live that way." Something about the way he said those words made my heart sink. Then another guest smiled and asked, "Your father must be incredibly proud of everything you've accomplished." Daniel glanced at me for only a second before taking a sip of his wine. "He's proud now," he replied, "but let's just say our definitions of success have always been very different." I could feel everyone's eyes slowly turning toward me. Sophia's father laughed and asked, "So where did your business instincts come from? Certainly not from your father?" More laughter filled the room. Daniel smiled. "Definitely not." For the next 20 minutes, I quietly listened as my own son spoke about building his life entirely through hard work and determination. He spoke as though every achievement in his life had happened without anyone else's help. He never mentioned the second job I worked to pay his college tuition, the mortgage I refinanced to help him start his career, the years I spent sacrificing my own dreams to give him opportunities I never had. And honestly, that didn't bother me. Parents don't raise children expecting public recognition. Then came the moment I'll never forget. One of Sophia's wealthy uncles looked at me and asked politely, "Mr. Carter, what advice did you give Daniel that helped him become so successful?" Before I could answer, Daniel interrupted. "Actually, I learned most of my important life lessons by doing the exact opposite of what I saw growing up." The entire dining room became silent. Even Sophia looked uncomfortable. He smiled before continuing. "My father always taught me that money doesn't matter. That character is more important than success. Unfortunately, that's the kind of thinking that keeps people average their entire lives." For the first time that evening, I realized something heartbreaking. My son wasn't embarrassed by my clothes. He was embarrassed by my values. Then, without warning, he reached into his wallet and pulled out $150. He placed the money directly in front of me on the dining table. The room immediately became silent. "What's this?" I asked quietly. "Consider it gas money," he replied. I smiled politely, believing I had misunderstood him. "For what?" He looked me directly in the eyes and said the 6 words that would change my life forever. "Never show your face here again." The entire room froze. Sophia whispered his name in shock. "Daniel." He ignored her and continued speaking. "Look around this room, Dad. This is my life now. These are my people. I don't want to spend the rest of my career explaining why my father still believes money doesn't matter." I sat there quietly staring at my son. The little boy I once carried on my shoulders had somehow become a stranger sitting across the dinner table. He pushed the money toward me once again. "Take it and please never show your face again." For several seconds, nobody said a word. Then I slowly picked up the $150 and placed it in my pocket. Not because I wanted it, because I wanted him to understand the weight of what he was giving me. I stood up, smiled softly, and looked at my son one last time. "Very well," I said calmly. "I hope life gives you everything you're looking for." Then I quietly walked toward the front door. That night I didn't argue. I didn't cry. And I never went back. My son asked me never to show my face again. So for the next 10 years, I respected his wishes. 10 years is a long time. Long enough for a little girl to grow up. Long enough for wounds to become scars. And sometimes, long enough for people to finally understand what they lost. After leaving my son's house that night, I quietly sold my home and moved to another city. I changed my phone number, except for one private number that only a few people knew. I spent the next 10 years doing something I had always dreamed of doing, helping children. I dedicated my life and fortune to building children's cancer hospitals and funding treatments for families who couldn't afford them. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because I finally had the freedom to spend my remaining years making a difference. Ironically, the son who was ashamed of my values had been right about one thing. Money matters, but only when it's used to improve someone else's life. 10 years passed without a single phone call from Daniel, until one ordinary Tuesday afternoon. My assistant walked into my office and smiled. "Congratulations, Mr. Carter. You've been selected to receive the National Humanitarian Award this year." I reluctantly accepted the invitation. The ceremony was broadcast live across the country. During my acceptance speech, I said something I had believed my entire life. Success is not measured by what you keep. It's measured by what you give away. Thousands of people watched the broadcast that evening, including a 14-year-old girl named Emma, my granddaughter. She was sitting beside her parents when she suddenly stood up and pointed at the television. "Dad, isn't that Grandpa?" The room immediately became silent. Daniel slowly turned toward the television screen and saw my face for the first time in 10 years. Later, Emma would tell him something that broke his heart. "You always told me Grandpa abandoned us, but he doesn't look like someone who abandons people. That night, my private phone began ringing. 1 missed call, 12 missed calls, 43 missed calls, 97 missed calls, finally, 178 missed calls. The last voicemail simply said, "Dad, I'm so sorry, please come home." I sat quietly in my office, staring at the screen for several minutes before smiling softly. Because 10 years ago, my son told me never to show my face again. And sometimes the hardest thing for a parent to do is to respect their child's wishes until they're finally ready to take them back.